All right, so welcome to this webinar. It's called Next Thought Prediction, and it's going to be probably the most powerful webinar that you will ever watch online, and I'll explain in a few minutes why this is so. But if you allow me, I'm just going to share this live stream in my Facebook group that I invite you to join. I'm going to put the link in the comments below. But this is the most powerful webinar that you'll ever watch, because it's going to teach you how to predict other people's thoughts, and therefore you can influence and even control their thinking. And I don't mean control in a bad or malevolent way, but simply that people give you permission to control their mind, in the same way that when you watch a movie, let's say by Steven Spielberg, you invite them you allow Steven Spielberg to control your mind, control in a bad or so that you have a great cinematic experience. So that's what I mean by mind control. So I'm just going to share this link with my Facebook group members. And I guess mind control is important if you want to succeed in business, in particular if you want to succeed with your online or digital business, because on the internet you have to be able to influence other people's minds. Like if you were launching a retail store, it wouldn't be that hard to, relatively speaking, to influence people's minds. But on the internet, people don't have access to your store. They cannot touch your products. They cannot, physically interact with your salespeople. And therefore, the internet game, or digital marketing, or internet marketing, or e-commerce is a very interesting game. It's very mental, right? So, when you're working online or doing digital marketing, you're basically interacting with other people's minds. So digital marketing essentially is about interacting productively in a win-win atmosphere, interacting with other people's minds. And therefore, you can have a tremendous competitive advantage if you learn how to influence or control other people's minds. So this is what this webinar is going to be about. So basically, for me, the internet, really, might be shocking to a lot of people, but from a digital marketing perspective, from a commercialization or e-commerce perspective, you have to understand the internet not as a network of computers, but really as, this is very shocking. This is the first time you're gonna see this statement. Okay, it might be shocking, but that's what information, true information, is about. It's about something that surprises you. Okay, so the internet is someone's mind. That's what the internet is. So let that sink in for a few seconds. The internet is not a network of computers. Of course, that's what it is fundamentally. It's not cables, intercontinental cables connecting computers. We all know that, right? So we don't have to talk about that hardware component. But the internet, from a digital marketing perspective, it's really someone's mind. So when you do something on the internet using your keyboard, right? You use your keyboard to send an email to someone, ultimately it's gonna reach someone's mind. That's what it is, really. You're using your keyboard on your computer, on your tablet, on your smartphone. You're sending an email. That's the oldest form of communication. It's also the most effective, by the way, because people typically don't check like 2 or 3 or 5 email inboxes. They just have one, the main one, that they're checking every day. whether it's Gmail or whether they're work email. So people have only one email address. They might have a TikTok account, a Facebook account, a LinkedIn account, but typically they have just one email inbox. So you're sending a message to someone to their email inbox. I'm just going to put message here to be complete, right? You're using your keyboard to send a message, and it goes to the person's email. And so after that, when they open the email, it reaches their mind. Okay, so before the keyboard, I guess we have your mind. So you're using your mind, you're thinking something, you're typing, and then you're formulating the message. And these days with ChatGPT, it's easier than ever to formulate a message. You're clicking send by email, and it reaches someone's mind. So this is such an important sequence that it's probably a good idea to print it and put it somewhere, on the fridge or at your workstation at home or in the office, because this is really how you're going to become rich. You have to control this sequence, this process. So I'm just going to blow it up so that we can explore in greater detail. It's very similar to what's happening right now. I'm speaking through OBS Studio and I'm live streaming this webinar. I'm using my keyboard and I'm sending a message in real time. It's a voice message and it's a visual message because you can see this Google drawing. And it's not email because you can see it on YouTube, but it is reaching your mind. So ultimately, digital marketing is all about someone's mind. And that's why I said before that digital marketing or internet is really someone's mind that you manipulate. So digital marketing is controlling someone's mind. The internet is someone's mind, but digital marketing is when you're controlling someone's mind. So the $1 million question, literally this is $1 million or even $1 billion question. What is it? So $1 million question. How do you control someone's mind through the internet? And you can even control other people's minds while you're sleeping, while you're on vacation, while you're playing tennis, as I do. You just program the internet to control other people's mind. So once again, before we start and I get into the nitty-gritty detail of the masterful insight I came up with a couple of days ago, which I call Next Thought Prediction, NTP. Before we get into that, I want to mention very clearly that when I say control other people's minds, I don't mean like MK Ultra, the program by the CIA, or anything that is malevolent or malicious or criminal. You're controlling other people's minds with their permission. So for example, I'm going to be controlling your mind for the next few minutes, but you're watching this live stream. You want to learn something about this sequence. You want to learn how to make money easily on the internet. So you're giving me permission to control your mind, right? You can walk away anytime from this live stream. So that's what I mean by controlling other people's mind. I mean with their permission. Okay, so this is not hypnotism. This is not anything forceful that I'm imposing upon you. You want me to control your mind because you want me to teach you something. And I cannot teach you something unless I have control of your mind. Okay, so now that we understand that, let's talk about the main insight that I want to share with you. And you're going to see that this is very powerful. I've never taught this in any digital marketing course that I've given at Taft College. Not because I didn't want to teach it, but because the insight didn't occur to me. So what is Next Thought Prediction? Now, you might probably recognize the idea of next token prediction. And of course, this is what ChatGPT is doing. ChatGPT is a large language model that has been trained by OpenAI. And, I'm not going to get into the details. You can find a lot of YouTube videos on that. But basically, when you write a prompt like the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy, and then ChatGPT has to respond. and it's going to respond the lazy dog. Why? Because it's been trained on the internet, and you see this sentence over and over again on the internet, right? The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. It's not jumps over the lazy bird, it's not over the lazy crocodile, it's really just the dog. That's the next token. Like a token is a little bit like a word, but it's shorter than a word. A token is almost like a syllable, so a word can contain many tokens. But anyways, next token prediction is what ChatGPT is doing. It's predicting the next token. And of course, this is a simplistic example, but a more sophisticated example is you ask a question, and ChatGPT can produce a 500-word essay. So it's just repeating the next token prediction. It's writing one word after another, and at the end you have a 500-word essay. It's really quite magical. I don't exactly understand how it works, but it just keeps predicting the next token, and at the end it has a 500-word essay that looks actually pretty good. So it's really like magic. But today I want to talk about another kind of magic, where instead of predicting the next token, I'm going to be able to predict the next thought that the consumer has, right? So if you can predict the next thought that the consumer or the business manager or the executive or the employer, if you can predict their next thought, then you can control and direct their thinking and even their feeling, because thoughts will lead to emotions, which will lead to actions on their part, and it leads to results. And the results can be money for you, but it's also a service or product for the customer. So it's basically two types of results in a business context. But the first thing, of course, is you have to predict their thought, and you want to lead the consumer, the buyer, to a certain thought, which will lead to a certain emotion, which will trigger a particular action. Ideally, the action should be that they pull out their credit card and they enter the purchase order, and then they receive the product or service, and you make money. But maybe I'm going to talk about this in a future webinar, but that's not as important as the main step of that sequence, that critical sequence where you're making money. The first step, the most critical step, is how can you guide prospects and customers and even investors towards the right thought. So I'm going to be more specific here, and I'm going to write right thought. This is the target that you're aiming for. You want to control their mind and guide their mind through a sales webinar, through a video, through an audio program, a podcast. You want to guide them towards the right thought. Why? Because when they have the right thought, then it will trigger the right emotion, which can be desire, it can be it can be greed, right? Like if you're pitching an investment program, or you're giving investment advice, or you're selling a business product that will help them to make more money, you want them to feel desire, you want them to feel greed in a good sense of the word, like the Gordon Gekko sense, right? Greed is good, greed is right, greed works, etc. You want them to feel desire, greed, you want them to feel excited, you want them to feel something positive that will somehow trigger them to take a certain action. That's the purpose of desire. If you have a desire, or you're excited and you're ready to take action, but you're not able to take action, then it leads to frustration, right? So obviously in a commercial context, you want them to have the right emotion, and that leads to the right action. Now, the right action, of course, depends on what you're aiming for. It could be, they join your email list. It could be they sign up for a Zoom webinar. It could be they book you for a free consultation, and of course at the end of the consultation you're going to pitch your product or your service. It could be they buy a ticket to an event online or offline. It could be they buy a digital product like a video course, they pay and then they have access to the video course right away. So the action really depends on the what you're currently aiming for. And after they take action, ultimately, they sign up for the webinar, they book you for consultant. Ultimately, it's going to lead to money for you. So it's going to lead to revenue. But like I said, all of this will occur naturally, like a nuclear chain reaction. What you have to do is lead your prospects to the right thought. And so you have to understand next thought prediction. How do you manage their thinking process in the same way that Steven Spielberg manages your emotions while you're watching a movie, I don't know, like Jaws or Indiana Jones? Like 99.9% of the population will feel certain emotions at certain times in the movie, and that's why like movie directors are so famous. They can make you feel something, and they can even sidestep the thought process. You're not really thinking much when you're watching a movie, or when you're at Disneyland and you're on a certain ride. You feel the emotions right away, so you're not thinking so much. And that's the beauty of movies or experiences that make you feel something and you feel alive. You don't have to think anything. So anyways, in a business context, typically it's not about just emotions. You have to lead people to a certain thought. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can actually lead them to have a certain thought in their mind. Okay, so I'm just going to create a new page. And this is very exciting, because once you understand that you have the ability and the power to lead people to a certain thought, then you can go online and you can learn copywriting, which is really the art of selling with words. You can go online and you can use the right words to lead them to the thought that you want them to have. Okay, so let's take a look at what's happening in the mind of the customers. And for that, I have to use a kind of diagram, and you'll see that the prospect or whoever you're talking to, they are in a way limited in how they can respond to you. Like, they don't have infinite choices. And what I mean is that, let's take an example. So let's say that this is the mind of the prospect. We're just gonna blow it up. They don't have an infinite range of responses. So let's say they wake up in the morning and they have the main thought that they have is, I'll have breakfast now. And so with that thought in mind, they're gonna make a coffee, and then they're gonna have their breakfast. So that's the main thought that most people have when they wake up in the morning. Now, and that's the situation they're in. But in a commercial context, let's say after they have breakfast, the new situation is that they sit in front of their laptop, and they see your landing page. Let's say that they're searching for something on the internet, and they see your landing page where you're talking about your product or your service. Okay, so this is the situation that sorry about that. Yeah, this is a situation where you can begin to predict their next thought. Okay, so let me just create a new Google page. So this is what we have to work with, and here this is where the game begins, the copywriting game. So they're gonna, let's say they're looking for, I don't know, training on how to make money online. Okay, and that's what your landing page is all about. Now, I know it sounds strange, but when they visit your landing page, it's like as if their mind was totally blank, and you can start putting words into their minds. So for example, on your landing page, let's say, and this is really the art of copywriting, you're just putting words into their minds so that you can trigger the right thought and the right emotions and the right action and the right results. So let's say you're putting a word like let me see, make money with AI, or you're putting a question. Have you ever thought about how to make money with AI? So this is a sentence, it's a question, and typically questions are good because you're interacting with the reader. And so from this question, they're going to have, a certain reaction, right? You're asking a question. They're either thinking yes or thinking no. Like you're asking a question, the answer is either yes or no. So in their minds, they're going to answer, yeah, you know what? I went on YouTube and I saw a couple of dudes, in their 20s, and they're creating AI agents and they're making a killing. So in that case, it's yes. Or it could be no. I'm a secretary. I've never thought about making money with AI. Or I'm an engineer. I never thought about making money with AI. I actually make $90,000 a year. So whatever it is that they're thinking, you don't have to concern yourself, but basically it's yes or no. Okay, so this is a way to kind of predict their answers, their next thought, which is either yes or no. Okay, that's the advantage of asking a question. Okay, so whether they're answering yes or no, your next question can be something like, if you've answered yes, we have good news for you. Okay, so here they're not thinking much, they're just waiting for you to announce the good news, right? And so you continue like this, and maybe you can ask another question, something like, imagine, but before we give you the good news, imagine you're on the beach with your family or loved one. No, wait, that's not mutually exclusive. Okay, with your family or significant other, and your bank account grows without your doing anything. So this is it's not really a next thought prediction, it's more like next thought insertion. So I'm just going to put it here. You're inserting a thought into their minds. So let's call it next thought insertion. It's a little bit like the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio called Inception. You're inserting a thought into their minds, and this is a pleasant thought, right? So they're going to be open to your suggestion. You're saying, imagine you're on the beach with your family, and you're with your feet in the water, and with the beautiful cloudless sky over you, and you're enjoying a nice drink, and at the same time your bank account, you can check it on your phone. Your bank account grows by hundreds of dollars every hour without your doing anything. So you're inserting a thought. Okay, and so and this is what copywriting is all about. It's about inserting pleasant thought into their minds, so they are in a certain in a certain state of mind. They feel good. Okay, and so you continue to do that with your copywriting, and then you get to a point where they have great desire for your product, which will teach them how to generate passive income, so that their bank account can grow without their having to do anything. But after that, this is the desire. There's always something that accompanies the desire, because people have infinite desires, but there's something that is stopping them, and it's what I call a belief. They have a limiting belief that they can't do it. Okay, so you have desire, and it's always in opposition to their belief, their internal belief. They're gonna say, yeah, it sounds nice, it's I can actually imagine myself with my kids and my wife and my dog and my husband, etc. But I don't believe that my bank account can grow naturally, right? They that, because if they believed that it was possible, they would have been rich by now. They would have learned, all the knowledge and skills that they need to learn in order to grow a passive income, like I do. I have passive income. That's why I don't have to work. But they don't believe it. I don't have to believe it. I know that it's possible because I've achieved it with my businesses and with my investment. Like my Bitcoin is, I think I have like a return on investment of 156% so far, which is pretty good. It's better than Warren Buffett. But anyways, so I don't have to believe. I know. But most people don't even have the belief that they can generate passive income. So yeah, sure, passive income, that's great. Everybody wants it. Everyone has that desire. But in terms of the belief, not everyone has the belief that they can actually achieve passive income. And so now you can predict the next thought or the next belief, because a belief is just a thought that you keep practicing, right? People have been practicing this thought, and the thought that they've been practicing is that I have to work in order to make money. If I don't work, I don't make money. Like, people believe this to be true. Like, they believe it's absolutely true that I have to wake up, I have to get dressed, I have to drink coffee, I have to drive or commute to work, I have to actually physically be in the office, otherwise I cannot make money. I cannot be on the beach and make money like what Peter is claiming right now. There's no way I can do that. So it's just a thought. But over time, they keep thinking the same thing. I have to work, I have to work, I have to work to make money. And it becomes a belief. But the belief, this is very interesting. If you look at the word belief, what do you see? You see that the word lie. A belief is a lie. But it's a lie that you keep thinking, and you've been thinking that lie for the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. You've been thinking about it so often, reflexively, without conscious activity, that it's just a thought, but you believe it so much that you think it's absolute truth. You think that what Peter is saying, you can be on the beach and your bank account is going to grow naturally. You don't believe it to be true at all. So when I say, imagine and all of this, you're going to say, yeah, that sounds nice, Peter, but you know what? I have to go back to work, so sayonara. So, they might stop reading because they don't believe, right? So you know that people who are working hard are not going to believe you when you mention passive income. And so that's the first thought prediction, the first belief prediction. You can actually predict with a high degree of certainty that they're not going to believe you, and therefore their next thought is one of disbelief. Okay, so let me just put it over here so that we have more space. So you know that their next thought, okay, after you invite them to imagine themselves on the beach, okay, you can predict that their next thought is going to be something along the lines of, sounds nice, but I, John Smith, but I can't do that. Or, I can't imagine myself generating passive income. So you know that. Now, do you know this with 100% certainty? No. There's nothing certain in life. I always tell my students there's only three things that I'm absolutely sure of in my life. One, there will always be taxes. Two, death will come inevitably for everyone. And three, I'm 100% heterosexual. This is a joke, but they all get it. I can only promise three things with absolute certainty. So in the same way, when you predict the next thought that they have, probably 90% or 95% probability they will have something like this. It's not going to be a precise thought, but it's going to be along the lines of, yeah, Peter, it sounds nice, but you know what? I can't do that myself. Other people can do it, but I can't imagine myself generating passive income. And so, because that this is the most likely thought that they're going to have if they're normal people, then the next sentence that you write will be something that responds to that thought, right? It has to respond to the thought that they're mostly likely to have. So I'm just going to put an arrow to show you that, if that's the thought that they are likely to have, then of course it makes sense for you to answer that thought by putting a sentence, something like, I know you're probably thinking that you cannot do it. And then you continue, and this is the art of copywriting. You predict the next thought and you respond to it. But let me share a story with you. And here, of course, you share a story with someone who was in a similar situation, who couldn't believe that she could make it happen, and somehow, with your training program, you helped her to overcome that belief. So, for example, you can say that Susan was in a similar situation, but one day, we taught her how to make $10 by selling an ebook. And once she broke through that barrier, she was able to make $500 in 6 months. And after that, she was making $20,000 per month. And after that, she made over a six-figure income per year. So you're answering their likely thought, their likely belief that they can't do it. And so that's what next thought prediction really is. You're creating something, a situation where, you're inviting them to have a pleasant thought, and most people will engage in this pleasant thought because it's very pleasant. It's like a dream. But that when they engage in this thought experiment, with almost absolute certainty that they will have this next thought, where they don't believe that they can do it. So we're going to put an arrow here to show that after they have this thought experiment, they probably don't believe that, that they can achieve something similar. Okay, so that's it. It goes from here, and then they have a resistant belief, and even though you're not talking to them in person, because you're a copywriter, right? They're just reading a letter, you respond to it. And then at the end here, you're asking another question. And so again, this question could be a yes or no answer, or it could be an invitation for them to engage in a certain mental activity, right? So I'm just going to put here and that's what copywriting is ultimately. Copywriting is a lot of fun because you're just asking one question after another, and after you ask a question, they will respond in a particular way. So here they will have a next thought or belief again, but I'm just going to put thought for now. So they have a next thought because you're asking a question. So you ask another question and they will have the next thought. So it keeps going like this, and eventually, you're gonna be able to close a deal because throughout this process, you were able to guide them one step at a time. You help them to clarify their desire, what they really want, and you're overcoming their resistant beliefs, and ultimately, it's going to lead to your proposing a product. And of course, when you propose a product, once again, the first reaction they will have is, it's too expensive, or, they're afraid of making a mistake, and all of these thoughts that they have before purchasing a product, we call them objections, right? They're going to object to it because people are like that, especially on the internet. They cannot see your store, they cannot see your face. It's, scams are happening all the time. So you can predict what they're going to think. So let me show you a list of potential thoughts that they will have when you try to close a deal, assuming that you've helped them to overcome whatever resistance they have. So let's say, I'm just going to summarize, right? You ask them to imagine something, and then they have a resistant thought, and then you overcome that resistance through stories of your past clients. So let's assume that you're able to overcome their limiting beliefs. Like, for example, John doesn't believe that he can generate passive income. So you overcome all the beliefs, and now you're pitching a product. Let's say you're pitching a webinar where you're charging $500, and it's going to be 3 sessions, and the webinar is called How to Generate Passive Income. So they're ready to consider your webinar because $500 is really nothing, because you tell them you're going to be able to generate I don't know, maybe $2,000 to $10,000 per month. So $500 is really nothing, because this is what they can do in a month, minimum $2,000. And so when you pitch the webinar at $500, through experience, but also through logic, that they're going to have the following thoughts, okay? Either it's too expensive, they don't have time to go through the webinar of 3 sessions. We're going to put 3 sessions of 2 hours each. They don't have time. Another thought could be they had a bad experience before, they were scammed before. Another one could be, need to talk to wife or husband. Although $500, I don't think you need to talk to your wife, but it could happen, need to talk to wife. Another one could be, I need to shop around because they might want to find a better deal. And maybe the greatest thought that you can predict is that fear of making wrong decision. So by wrong decision, it could be a number of things. The teacher is not good, but they paid $500 already. The teacher is good, but they're not able to implement. They don't have time to implement what they learned. So for whatever reason, they're afraid of making the wrong decision. And so this is probably the biggest, or the main fear, the main thought that they're going to have. So we're going to put that in bold. And so this is the next thought that they have. And you can predict that next thought. And you can predict it because that's typically what happens. Consumers oftentimes are very fearful. And for reason, like $500 you're going to spend on a stranger on the internet. Of course, they're going to be afraid. So you tell them, because you can predict their thought, right? You can tell them, yes, I know it's scary, and so when you say something like, I know it's scary, but you can read testimonials here, and also we have 100% satisfaction guarantee. Just a phone number, just phone us and we'll cancel, or don't even phone us, just send us an email and we'll cancel automatically. And of course, if you say all of this in a video where they see your face, it's even more credible. But the reason why you can say all of this is that you can predict with a high degree of confidence that they're afraid of making the wrong decision. They're afraid of losing $500. And so I hope what I've been able to convince you in this short webinar, it can be more advanced, is that people's thinking process is not irrational. It's not like, when you are talking about their being on the beach And it's not like when you propose this thought experiment, they're going to think about what they're going to have for supper. No, it's not going to be like that, because when they begin to read your landing page, their mind is blank, like a blank sheet of paper. So whatever is in their mind is what you're putting there, right? So when you're putting the suggestion, hey, let's play a game, imagine that you're on the beach, right? So they will imagine, but the problem is that the next thought they have is that, nah, it sounds nice, but it's not for me. I can't do it. I've never generated passive income before. And then you know that that's what they're going to think. And so you respond to that. And then you ask another question. Next thought. Now imagine your wife. You can buy your wife the jewelry, the diamonds that she wants. You can buy your kids all the toys that they want. But most importantly, you can give them a great education. So you talk not just about them, but about the family, their children. Imagine how great they will feel. So that's the next thought that you put into their minds. So as you can see, it's really just a matter of inserting thoughts that will motivate them, inserting desires, inserting the lifestyle, the future that they want, and then overcoming the resistance that might come along the way. But whatever you suggest to them, there's going to be a corresponding negative belief, and you just overcome that belief. Right? You just overcome that belief, and that's what copywriting is all about. Copywriting is just about predicting the next thought that they're going to have. You predict the next thought or the next belief that they're going to have, and you overcome that belief. Now, in a real sales situation, the salesperson can read the body language and the face and can respond in real time, right? A good salesperson can read the body language and respond appropriately. But when you're writing copy on the internet, you don't see the face and you can't read the body language of the prospect. So you have to predict the most likely thought that they will have. You have to predict it. And as I've shown you here, it's probably 2 or 3 thoughts that they will have in response to your suggestion. And based on the 3 or the 4 thoughts that they will have, and that includes objections, right? There can be different objections. These are objections. Based on the objection, you can answer accordingly. So for example, here I mentioned the response to their fear reaction. Okay, you can say, oh yeah, it might sound scary, but because $500 is a lot of money, so you're repeating their fear so they know that you're actually thinking about their fear. You can say, yes, we understand. Yes, I understand that $500 might sound like a hefty investment, but you can read testimonials here. You can actually call or email some of our clients, and you can read our satisfaction guarantee, blah, 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 and you help them to alleviate that fear. You can also answer the other objection. You can say, sure, you can shop around on the internet and maybe you're going to find something for free, but it's not going to be as guaranteed or structured as our training. So you're actually answering that thought that they might have. They might not have, but if they do have that thought, you have an answer for that. You might say, you might have been scammed in the past, but in our case, our professors are from legitimate colleges, and you can read their LinkedIn profile over here. So you're answering that thought that they might have. You don't know if they have that thought, right? Because you're not a salesperson standing in front of them. But if they have that thought, where they've been scammed before, you have an answer for that. You might say, yes, we know, you have to spend three sessions of 2 hours. We know that it's going to take some time and effort from you, but we guarantee you that you're going to be able to make that kind of passive income. It's really worth it. So you're answering that objection, even though they might not have it. But if they do have that objection, you have a ready answer for that. And you can say, yes, $500 might sound expensive, but think about the outcome that you will be able to generate. This is passive income. Think about your future. Think about your wife, your children. And that's how you overcome the expensive objection. And so, copywriting is really not that hard. I was giving a digital marketing course, and one student said that copywriting is about playing with language, and he's right. To a certain extent, you have to be good with language, but you don't have to have a degree in English literature. In fact, many immigrants who are using English as a second language, they're able to become excellent copywriters, and that's only because they're able to predict the thoughts that the thoughts that people have, and they will respond to that thought. So I'm going to end this webinar by giving you an example of how this kind of thing is applicable even in areas outside of business. So let's say you're a guy and you're meeting a woman. Can you predict the 3 thoughts that a woman would have when she meets you, like a complete stranger? And when I asked students that, they didn't know. It's kind of cute that one student, or actually several students, began to write down what I was teaching, because obviously they want to approach women and ask them out. So let's say you're a single guy, you're approaching a woman, and you know that these are the 3 thoughts that most women will have. And women will have these thoughts or these questions in their heads even without knowing. This is biological programming. So the first question that a woman will have, so let me just put the scenario here. Okay, scenario is man approaches woman in public. So the 3 thoughts or the 3 questions women will have, and this is happening at lightning speed, so that even the woman might not be aware of this. But you, as the man who is approaching a woman, when you're aware of these 3 reflexive thoughts and questions, then you're going to be able to make the woman feel at ease. And this, this is the same technique when you're doing telemarketing. It's the same technique when you're approaching someone. A man could be approaching another man, a woman could be approaching another woman, etc. But this scenario is particular because women typically feel more vulnerable. So when a man approaches them, they will have the following 3 questions or 3 thoughts. Number 1, I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about the 3 thoughts that you think a woman will have when a man approaches her. I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about it. So the first thought or the first question is danger. So she's gonna have a thought like, is he dangerous? And in a fraction of a second, like we're talking about 100 milliseconds or even less, she looks at the guy, the way he's dressed, his face, his demeanor, the speed at which he's moving, all of that, she's gonna conclude, is this guy dangerous or not? So danger, yes or no. The second question, supposing that, he's not dangerous, because if he was dangerous, she would just turn around and run away and screaming, right? Like if he looks like dangerous. But assuming that he's not dangerous, so her next question, which comes a millisecond, like in a fraction of a second. A millisecond is like, 1 second is 1,000 milliseconds, okay? So a millisecond is very quick. The next thought or question is, who is he? Assuming that he's not dangerous. And so who is he doesn't mean like, is he a lawyer? Is he a doctor? It could be, but it's something more generic. So for example, if she looks at him and he's dressed like a police officer, then okay, he's a police officer. Or if he's wearing a suit, then he's probably a businessman or a professional, and somebody, in other words, who's credible if he's wearing a suit. If he's wearing a janitor's suit, then she can conclude quickly, okay, this guy's a janitor, and he's approaching me. Maybe there's a problem in my building, or maybe there's a problem with the plumbing or something. So who is he? That's the next question. And the last question is, of course, what does he want? So these are the 3 questions that women will have in their heads in the right order. And so when you approach a woman and you understand female psychology and you answer these 3 questions, you're going to be able to start a conversation. I'm not saying that you can flirt successfully with her, or maybe you don't even intend to flirt with her. You just want to start a conversation. I'm not suggesting that by answering these 3 questions you're going to have a great conversation or you're going to be able to get her phone number, but I'm saying that you can make her feel at ease because you're answering the 3 thoughts that she probably will have, and therefore she can feel relaxed and you can have a normal conversation like as if you were talking to a friend or a coworker, etc. Okay, so assuming that you don't look like a criminal, right? So she meets you and you're moving slowly. This is very important. You have to move slowly. If you move quickly, women interpret that as being a sign of danger. So you have to move slowly. You have to smile. You have to maybe, you have to be clean. You have to nice shoes, maybe wear a watch and have expensive phone, whatever. But you should not project the idea that you're dangerous. Okay, nothing in your hands. Like don't hold anything intimidating in your hands. So you move slowly and there's no danger. And you can mention, oh, hi, my name is John. I'm actually working in this building. And or you can say, hi, my name is John. I'm a lawyer. And then, okay, so she knows who you are. You're a lawyer, you're a businessman, you're an entrepreneur, right? And next, you want to mention the reason why you're talking to her. I saw you over there, and I thought to myself, I need to ask a woman advice because I'm about to do something, I don't know, for my niece, or, I want to buy a gift. So what is the reason why you're talking to her? Of course, you don't want to say, oh, the reason I'm talking to you is that I want to get your phone number. Well, obviously, you can't say that. But you can make up a legitimate reason. So as soon as she has a legitimate or appropriate reason for talking to her, then her defense will usually be lowered and she can start a normal conversation with you because she knows the reason why you're talking to her. So this is very important. The first 2 steps are typically easy, but the third step, you have to mention the reason why you're talking to her so that she feels comfortable. You can't say, well, it depends on your style, but you can't say something like, well, the reason I'm talking to you is that I find you're very beautiful, and you can't say that unless you say it in a way that is humorous, but typically you want a legitimate reason that doesn't have anything to do with flirting. Okay, of course, unless you're in a nightclub, that's a different story. In a nightclub you can be more forward, but typically when you're talking to a woman, let's say on the street or in a public place, you wouldn't be so forward. And by the way, this is the same thing in telemarketing. I used to work in telemarketing in my early 20s. You call someone, so obviously on the phone nobody would have that thought because you're on the other end of the line. You're not going to be able to be a danger for them. But on the phone you have to say who you are. Hi, my name is Peter. I'm currently doing a survey in your area. Okay, so that's who I am. I'm doing a survey. I'm not a salesperson, so already it makes people feel at ease. You can say, I'm a market researcher and I'm doing a survey. Okay, that's who you are. And the next thing is, I'm calling you today because we're doing a survey on university studies and would like to have the opinions of parents regarding the quality of it, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's why I'm calling. So you can see that this applies to telemarketing. In the same manner, let's say I'm a guy and I'm approaching another guy. I'm gonna say, hi, my name is Peter. I'm a business owner of this, and can I talk to you for a minute because I'd like to have your opinion, blah blah blah. So I have a reason. So when a man talks to another man, it's very unlikely that the other man being approached is gonna think about danger. Now it depends on the situation. If I approach a guy, right, at midnight, and it's at a train station and there's only the 2 of us, of course, the other guy is going to ask himself this question, is this guy dangerous? So I have to prepare myself. But anyways, this is for women, right? So women will always wonder, is this guy dangerous? Who is he exactly? Or, generically, who is he? And what does he want? So as long as you can answer these 3 thoughts or questions, you're going to be able to engage in a good conversation. So this is just to prove to you that when you master the art of next thought prediction, when you master this art, this science, it's not going to be hard for you to engage with anyone on the internet, whether it's on LinkedIn, on YouTube. You can actually predict the thought that they're going to have, and you can have a conversation through skillful copywriting, because you can, just ask a question and they will have a certain thought, and then you continue, you respond to their thought, and then you ask another question, they will have another thought, and in a similar manner you will continue the conversation over here. So it's really about being inside of the mind of the prospect and knowing in advance what he's going to think. Okay, and like I said, they don't have an infinite number of options. When they are in a particular situation, they will think about certain thoughts, and if you can predict those thoughts, then you can respond, and you can engage them in the next thought, and you can respond, and that's how you lead them one step at a time, one thought at a time, towards the decision to buy from you. And it's really that simple. It's simple, but it doesn't mean it's easy. You have to practice. And probably the best way to master copywriting is you write a piece of copy, like a sales page, like this one, and you show it to a copywriter like myself, and I'm gonna tell you, what you did right or what you did wrong. Like you might predict that the prospect will have this thought over here, but in fact they will have another thought, and so that requires copywriting experience. So anyways, guys, I hope that this was a good introduction to this art and science, this very profitable science of next thought prediction, because if you can predict the next thought, then you can control their emotions, you can control their actions, and you can get them to generate results that are good for the both of you, right? But it all starts with predicting their thoughts. And most people, I think, don't practice this next thought prediction game because they've never had to really do copywriting or sell something. Like when you talk to your friends or when you talk to your workers, you never try to predict what they're going to think. You just let them say whatever they want to say, and most of the time you don't really care about what they're saying. You're just waiting for your turn to talk, right? So they're going to talk about their weekend, and you just yeah, sounds good, John, but you just want to share what you did over the weekend with your family, right? So people are very selfish that way, and that's perfectly okay. But in a commercial situation, you care about what they're going to think. You want to control what they're going to think so that they will arrive at the right thought, which leads to the right emotion, and then they will take the right action, and eventually they will generate revenues for you, and they will generate benefits for themselves. So it's really that simple. So anyways, guys, I'm going to stop here, but I hope you enjoyed this next thought prediction webinar, and I'll see you in the next live stream.